Welcome to Art Zone. Art Zone is a video document of art and artists in the Rockford area. In this episode, we will see Scott Snyder's cathode ray tubes and developing world views, paintings, video, and sculpture currently at Cafe Esperanto. We'll see a video piece from Bob Belt. Check in at the Rockford Art Museum with Laura Johnson and the exhibit Views of the Collection. And throughout the show, we will see fragments of Constructive Deconstruction, also at the Rockford Art Museum.
Hi, I'm Doc Slavkowski, and this is the Art Zone. We're coming to you from J.R. Kortman Center for Design, downtown in the heart of Rockford's Cultural District. This Art Zone will feature Rockford artist Scott Snyder, who is currently working on his Master's of Fine Arts degree at Bradley University. We'll take a look at his works, including those exhibited at the Kortman Gallery, and hear Scott's reflections on his multimedia art. Then we'll show you a video piece submitted by Bob Belt. Then Laura Johnson of the Rockford Art Museum will show us an exhibition entitled Views of the Collection, Historical Landscapes and Portraits. And throughout this art zone, we'll feature highlights of an exhibition entitled Constructive Deconstruction, also at the Rockford Art Museum, introduced by Dennis Horton.
Well, I'll have to answer that in two different ways. In high school, I became interested in art, but I didn't think I would become an artist. You know, I thought I'd be more pragmatic and go into engineering or something like that. But I took some art classes, Ted Simmering, Phyllis Stringer, and even an English teacher of mine were very influential. And me being in art, and her name was B. Collius. Ted took me aside one day. I did my first oil painting, and he saw something there, you know, that I had some talent. And yeah, I of course always doodle. You hear about artists doodling on folders and stuff, and I was a doodler as well. But he saw something there, so he had me oil paint the rest of the semester. And for me, that was kind of an ego boost and gave me a bit of self-confidence, you know, that I had a talent. But from there, you know, I graduated and I went onto college, and I, you know, took the computer science, and I was heading toward, you know, going into engineering. But once I started going into it, it just wasn't clicking. You know, it's strange. I was good in math, you know, through high school, but all of a sudden it's like my brain shifted, and I wasn't thinking in that mode anymore. So in a bout of desperation, I started taking art classes, and everything just clicked, and you know, I'm enjoying this, and you know, it was a liberation. Okay, I see, when I took the engineering classes, you know, the calc and inorganic chemistry, I really never got into the technical aspect. You know, I killed myself early on, and that, you know, I dropped out. It was more of an interest, I guess, I had in problem solving, and maybe in electronics. You know, just solving the puzzle. You know, I started off, I was really into painting. The engineering didn't kick in until I started doing three-dimensional work, which was just 2 years ago. So that is relatively new for me. But, you know, there is some background there in puzzle solving and problem solving that I like, that is more brought out in sculpture than it is in painting. Well, I like the interaction. I like that the people are somehow, you know, it's more than just looking at the piece. They're all of a sudden, the piece is reacting to the viewer, or the viewer, you know, in response is acting to the piece. You know, in our society, you know, we're just so information related, and you have to, like television, you have to get people's attention, such as commercials. You have to capture that attention. And with this, I can entrap the viewer a little bit and keep them there. I can keep them interacting. I've noticed with my infrared motion detector activated pieces that, the people walk back and forth and try and figure out whereabouts that it will set them off. And that gets them to look at the piece and involved with the piece longer than most people will look at a piece. Because you can walk through a museum and observe people, and they will only some people will spend 20 seconds on a piece. And I think this kind of solves that problem in some ways. I guess it was I evolved from two-dimensional work to three-dimensional work. The panel pieces, the Society series, were some of my last paintings that I did, which was probably 2 years ago till I got into sculpture. And I'm not going to stop painting. It's something, I'm fulfilling this 3D experience. Those panels, they relate because I started throwing them around on the floor and arranging them on the floor. So in a sense, the paintings became sculptural and three-dimensional as well. And the image, I had that little smiley head image on the television. That became part of my icon or artistic symbology that I took and developed into a three-dimensional head and cast in aluminum and other mediums and utilize that in 3 dimensions.
Like that.
See, well, I guess I'll answer. People like or hate that image. Some people see it in different ways. They see it as a clown-like image or the cynical smile. And some people like clowns, some kids like clowns, some kids are scared to death of clowns. And I see it as ourselves because they're parts of human nature that I like, and then some parts that are kind of scary. And so to me, it's a face that represents that, and also it could, and maybe over-explaining, it could be a mask, people have to wear each day. In our society, we're supposed to be happy, and but yet underneath that, people are going to interpret it that still it's either cynical or maybe it's a sinister smile, or maybe the guy is just overly happy. Each piece, it can be interpreted a little bit differently. What I'm trying to say with my work is there are two things. With just the head, not all my pieces relate to television. Some of my pieces just stand and are more symbolic on human nature, which I see as man possesses good and evil within himself. You would say, godly and fallen traits. And so, some of my figures, I have those little cast aluminum wobbly people. That was the next transformation from the Society series, which piled the fallen people. These wobbly that were not stable in character. And so I developed, and it's just kind of, and we're childlike too. We're not, I guess it's kind of a humbling, being humble. We're these childlike creatures, realizing that we possess these, we're not stable in character. But then I also apply all of that to the television medium as well, and how that evolution in our language kind of magnifies that instability it brings about. Because on television you see the comic and the tragic, just, we're barraged with those images, and they're magnified on television. And that's scary because television nowadays is that people watch all the time. I was TV generation. I grew up, that was my babysitter at times. And I think it's a desensitizing medium. I think it can be used properly, but I think it's not. Well, the TV dog, that's just kind of a nice, happy, a little cynical piece, because it's called Man's Best Friend, the dog being man's best friend, you say that. And I was thinking in my mind of, the images you see on TV of the beer-stained T-shirt guy coming home and flicking on the tube and paying absolutely no attention to family or anything else around him. And so, the television is, become our best friend. That's what we relate to more than other people. More just, the symbol of man's best friend and, man spending so much attention with a pet is that man or woman spending so much time with the television, and that you lose, what else is around you. There are people that get so engrossed with their pets as well. But, television, I think, is, there are 10 times more people that get overly engrossed in television. I'm probably one of them.
Do you still watch a lot of TV?
Oh, yeah. It's, I guess that's what I feed off of to get inspired for work. And I use some imagery from television. There's a painting that I have up at the gallery that watching all the talk shows, and one is from Sally Jesse Raphael, and it has some figure. Shannon hates father's new wife and whatever, and just that trying to think. So how these people air their dirty laundry on TV.
Yes, it is. Or
Well, there's some power in taking the television images out of context, either in a photographic image and putting it on canvas, or taking sound bites and working with the sound, or working with the imagery and video and putting that out of context and putting it in a gallery. Because art, you're supposed to think about. Television, you sit down in front of a TV, you don't think. So, it's that twist where you're thinking about it. Oh, 31 shopping days till Armageddon.
yeah, tell us about that.
Actually, I did that piece right before the Gulf War happened, but everything was escalating at that point. And a lot of my artwork, I always, not political, but just aware of global issues. That piece was kind of, cynical. It's a very cynical title, 31 Shopping Days Till Armageddon. Here it is around Christmas time. We're all thinking about what to buy each other, and, there's a potential for just this devastating war about to happen. And it was a devastating war. We won, but, so what? People died one way or the other. It's just war, and there are tragic things out there, and we isolate ourselves so much in our own little environments, in our own little microcosm, that we tend to forget. And television helps us to forget those things. Well, the piece I created, it's an older piece. I was thinking again about global issues and nuclear factory, and there was this juxtaposition with out in Oregon with this farm. And between the, what do you call those?
Silos.
Silos, yes. Between the silos, you could see the two cooling towers billowing their steam. And it's not really for or against, just the progressive nature, which brings me to Fred Ford. He's come into, his image also has ended up in this piece, and the progressive, nuclear power is progressive. It's seen as good by some and terrible by others. And Fred Ford, in this sense, as I was talking to Doc about this, is a progressive person who's come in and shaken things up in the Rockford community. The Society series, the narrow panels that I'm showing at J.R. Kortman, I've shown them in many different ways. J.R. Kortman, they're shown on the wall, vertical, just as separate individuals, not really relating, but they're all close together. In another gallery, I've shown them just piled on each other, and coming some on the wall, but then coming off the wall and flowing onto the floor, just like they've spilled out and they're falling on top of each other. And I referred before that, about this kind of man unstable and fallen, that it's like picking themselves up, and it's like pickup sticks. Well, some video projects, video like sculpture is relatively new to me, and I started dabbling in it probably a little before sculpture, which would be 2.5, 3 years ago. And my first project was with another artist, Ann Conver, and we did a piece called Psychobabble, and it was about just human nature, and it had the smiley head icons on the paintings. But as I spent time in Peoria, I saw this homeless man named Willie roaming the streets who dressed like a voodoo person and with makeup and feathers and red, and he had little horns coming out of his hat, and just a fascinating character. And I said, before I leave this town, that's one person I have to interview. And so I sought him out one day. He was downtown hanging out, and after talking to him and asked if he'd mind doing an interview, and he was all for it. And so brought down a camera and another person, and we talked to him, and just, I was curious about this man's lifestyle, because he's chosen to be homeless. You know, there are a lot of people that don't choose that lifestyle, but this is one he's chosen, and he basically is saying that he doesn't want to carry any material possessions with him, and he's just preparing for the end of the world. I would like to just do my art, have that as my main source, because that's what I get most pleasure out of. It's creative, it's a lot of fun. There are times when it is tough, you know, there are a lot of problems to solve, whether you're painting or sculpting, but it's my first love as far as occupation. But on the practical side, it's not really earning me quite an income yet, a little money here and there. So, you know, it's doing the other jobs, and, you know, with my MFA, I'd like to teach, I'd like to be around other artists and younger artists and help them, because that exchange of ideas that goes on within a university or an art school is really exciting. Art is a good thing. Doesn't have to be practical. A lot of my work isn't. Come down to J.R. Kortman, enjoy the show.
Constructive Deconstruction, the politics of contemporary collage, brings together three respected artists whose work demonstrates that the fragmented image is a vibrant and timeless component of current art making. Chicagoan James Faulkner creates surreal juxtapositions of images largely culled from different periods of the history of art. Susan Senseman, also of Chicago, probes issues about women and gender, the spirit, and the natural environment. Walter Hamady of Madison incorporates printed images and text with found objects to form a body of work rich in content and design.
I'm Laura Johnson, the Director of Education, and this is the Rockford Art Museum's permanent collection. We have on view a selection of the various landscapes and portraits that are featured in the museum's collection of the pieces that range from the 1850s to the 1950s. It's about 100 years of historical landscapes or portraits that represent a more naturalistic view at life in Rockford. Well, the Rockford Art Museum actually began in 1888 as a men's sketch club. And in the 1880s, these men started collecting various works of art to build up a collection. This is when the Rockford Art Museum was known as the Rockford Art Association. In 1925, we formed the Burpee Art Museum and Natural History Collection. And then in 1985, we became the Rockford Art Museum. Throughout this say about 75 years of time, we've been collecting these pieces, but they're not always on view. In fact, at the Burpee Museum, there were quite a few pieces that were in storage rather than always being shown. Now we have about 1,000 pieces in our collection that represent more of a historical look right on up to the contemporary period of various facets of American works of art. And this is the first time in many years that some of these pieces are being seen by the public. Many of them have been recently cleaned and recently put on view for people to see in, I'd say, over 20 years. Some very striking pieces in the museum's collection. We have one entitled The Morning Sun that's done by a very popular American female impressionist artist named Pauline Palmer. Recently, the University of Virginia Press actually published the image of the morning sun on the cover of a newly released book called The Sheltered Life. This is really quite a coup for the Rockford Art Museum and the Rockford community to have one of our works of art actually published as a frontispiece on a book. The other pieces represent Rockford area history. They're portraits of such people as Mr. Burpee himself, of other Rockford area founders, including Rockford area landscapes such as Route 2 near Byron, about the 1890s period of time. There's a portrait called Home Views by Belle Emerson Keith, which features a self-portrait of Belle Emerson, founder of the Keith Country Day School, in her living room area. Quite a wonderful piece that was again done in the 1890s. There are quite a few of them that represent Rockford as we once were. There's one that is Market Street with the Faust landmark in the background, and you can still go down to Market Street and see the red brick buildings that are located there. The style of cars have changed just a little bit in the 1920s, but it's quite a fascinating document on how Rockford used to look. Another piece is just off of the backyard of Tinker Swiss Cottage by Kent Creek that represents where the bluff used to be behind the Tinker Swiss Cottage. And this piece again dates to the late 19th, early 20th century. Right. There are quite a few pieces that are done by Rockford artists. The mission of the museum is really to collect Rockford area or Midwestern regional artists so that we show the works of art that are done by local artists as well as of scenes in the Rockford area. One such piece is done of Viola Barloga, of course, of the Barloga architectural family. So again, really representing the history of Rockford and the Rockford area artists. The exact number I don't know of how many Rockford area artists we do have in the collection, but I would say several dozen pieces done by Rockford artists just in this exhibit that features about 40 works of art. When visitors come into the art museum, I think they'll be struck by the beautiful ambiance that's created with the dimming of the lights and the colored walls. We've tried to recreate a living room-like setting so that people would feel comfortable coming into the museum and viewing these different works of art as if they were in more of a comfortable turn-of-the-century home with the shrimp-colored walls or the off-gray-green color, again with the subdued lighting. The museum is open and accessible to the public Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 5 and on Sundays from 1 to 5. There's also quite a few postcards that have been reproduced of the museum's collection that can be found in our museum store and other pieces from the museum's collection that will be shown in the next coming months.
If you have any comments or suggestions, please stop at Cafe Esperanto in downtown Rockford and let us know. Thanks for tuning in to another Art Zone.
People,